So thank you very much, guys, for joining this roadmap overview webinar. Steve Millidge, CEO of Payara, he's going to discuss the roadmap for the Payara platform and give a retrospective on the last few months, but also what can be expected in upcoming releases and some of the latest news on Jakarta EE 9 and the future. And maybe a few words about Payara Cloud as well. As always, we'll have a bit of time for questions at the end, so feel free to put in your questions, and then when I can, I'll ask Steve, or we'll save it to the end. So with that, I think we're all ready to go, Steve.
Okay, thanks. As I said, I'm going to be doing a update webinar on the Payara platform. This is one we do regularly every 3 months or so, and I'll basically cover, as Jaden said, what we've done and where we're going as well, and a couple of words about Payara Cloud. Just nod, Jaden, you can see the slides okay? Right, cool. So, a more detailed agenda. I'm basically going to, again, recap the differences between Payara Enterprise and Payara Community. I did that in the last session. I just got to summarize the philosophies we try in each release, as that's starting to bed in now in the Payara and actually starting to bring advantages to the Payara team and the community as well. I'll then have a look at what's new. So we delivered quite a bit over the past few months. So just to make people aware, because I know people don't necessarily follow everything we're doing and what we've released. I'll also have a demo in that of Payara Insight. I'll give a couple of slides on Jakarta EE 9 and the update there and our approach to Jakarta EE 9 and what we've delivered so far. I'll then cover some new releases that we have, or some new capabilities and some new features that are coming, and that will also include a piece on Payara Cloud and the philosophy behind that, and how that will impact Payara Server and Payara Micro going forward in 2021. And then we should, as Jaden said, have some time for discussion and questions if I don't talk too long. So, and if you've been following us, we basically did a big exercise at the first half of 2021 to differentiate between Payara Enterprise and Payara Community. And I just want to really reiterate what happened there and reiterate the sort of philosophy behind the two. So prior to sort of June this year, we used to run 3 streams of Payara. We had what was called the community stream, which was released quarterly, and that was standard open source built out of GitHub. We then had, that were available for customers, only 2 different streams of the software. They were the feature stream, which essentially was patches on community once a month, and the stability stream, which was a single version of Payara that was patched for 12 months, and it tended to update on the first release of the year, so February timeline. What we decided to do in beginning of this year, and then we sort of implemented around June, was to actually simplify this model down into 2 streams of the software. And there's a number of reasons for that. First was community. We wanted to update more regularly. From our engineering perspective, community releases were 3 months apart, and that caused problems in that if we broke something in community, then it would take 3 months before a fix would make it into the community stream, and we'd be asking people to sort of build from the mainline development to get any fixes that they needed. And obviously that's unstable. So from an engineering perspective, we wanted to push out more releases. And we also wanted to change the philosophy of community a bit so that we could be more innovative in the community edition and try out new things, try out new implementations, and just make it clear that we could drive innovation faster into the community. At the same time, we wanted to clarify to customers what enterprise was and what they got for their money when they purchase an enterprise subscription. So enterprise, we decided to combine the two streams that they had choices of previously into a single stream, and we put in place guarantees around compatibility, upgrades, and migration between different releases within those streams. And enterprise is focused on stability, because obviously enterprise is where people will be using running mission critical large scale applications, and they need software life cycles, upgrade paths, downported patches, and all the things that you need when you're running an enterprise system. So I'm not going to go through all this in detail, but this is starting to bear fruit for us, and I think bear fruit for the community as well, is that in the community side, we're starting to be braver and do bigger changes that were quite difficult in the previous model, because we would break things, we didn't want to break things and leave them broken for 3 months. And I'll come across, one of the big things you may have seen in the last release, which I won't cover here, is that we basically re-implemented all our open API implementation. It was causing us problems, the first implementation, so we re-implemented it in community. And because of the split of the way we did things, we were much more able to do that with confidence, in that any bugs that came up, we'd be able to catch quickly and fix quickly. And that happened, over the last few months. So Open API, we've got a much faster, much more, what's the word? It covers more edge cases than the previous implementation, and it is much more clever implementation, and then it hooks into the bytecode scanning to understand where things are and decide whether it needs Open API. So that then migrated into enterprise only in the last release, when we were happy that we'd iterated on it, it was good, it was solid, and it was suitable for people to run in mission critical. So that sort of summarizes the two philosophies, and I think that will allow us to rapidly drive forward community at the same time, while not getting lots of stick from customers that enterprise is unstable and it's causing them problems. So that the enterprise team can then focus on the stability on the enterprise side. So from our perspective, this just drives our organization, and is a big clarification of what we're trying to achieve. So with that said, let's go into what's new in Payara, and this will cover both enterprise and community. When we split them, everything is still open source in Payara, so it's just that community is focused on innovation, and enterprise, we need to focus on stability. So these things these arrive and they're available in both streams, but they have sort of different emphasis and will arrive at different times. One of the big things that got shipped into enterprise, although it is available in the community on the monitoring console project, is Payara Insight. So over the years, we've been building lots of capabilities in a plan to drive visibility into what's happening in the application server. One of the key things and key benefits I believe strongly on Jakarta EE applications is that there's a definitive split between how you package an application in the APIs you use, and then how you deploy it and run it, which I think is unique to Jakarta EE and is a very powerful model. So what we wanted to do was, as we are the owners of the runtime, is to try and drive visibility into applications. And we've done a lot of this over the years. And so we've added notifiers, we've added health check services, we've added request tracing. And a lot of that was, available on command lines and log files and things like that. So it wasn't that accessible. And over the past year, in the community side, we've been building the monitoring console, and that is really to try and surface all that information into something that is easily accessible for end users. And so we decided in the past month, so in the last release, that this was solid enough to release as Payara Insight into the enterprise stream. So it's available in GitHub and the monitoring console project. And this essentially allows you to see what's happening within Payara. And we've done a lot of work on the UI, and we've still got a lot of work to do now, even more work to do on the UI to build this out. But it now integrates with a lot of the subsystems that we have. So it integrates with, like I said, the health check services, the metrics services, MicroProfile metrics, notifiers, slow SQL logging, and request tracing. So I'm just going to show this quite quickly. So this is Payara Insight. So what we have, so this is basically a real-time monitoring system for Payara. What we have is a set of windows on the side here, dashboards, and which you can create your own, and you can create your own dashboards. And this then gives you insight into what's happening within Payara. So for here we have, active sessions, heap usage, CPU usage, standard sort of things that you'd want to see, thread pools and request counts and etc. And this is just hooked into the straight JMX metrics that you would get in Payara anyway. But this gives in real time. You can see that we've actually got, it monitors the whole domain. So it's using the data grid, domain data grid. So each instance pushes data into the data grid, and then the monitoring console, the Payara Insight, scrapes that and pushes it into the DAS, which is where this is running, and then displays the data. So this is standard JMX metrics, and you can add additional graphs through any JMX beans that you've got. We've also got integrated with the health check service. So in Payara, there's a health check service which has been there for quite a long time. It's probably not used as much as we'd like because it's a bit obscure in the sense that you have to use command lines, or you need to sit on, you need to enable it by default. It's not there, it's not on by default, so you need to go in and enable it in the console. And what it normally would do would just spit this out into the log file. It basically checks for thresholds that you configure for whether something is green, amber, or red. So whether it's a good, alert, warning, or bad. And all we're doing here really is visualizing it. So we have CPU usage, health check service, we have heap usage, GC, how much time is spent doing GCs, physical memory, hogging threads and stuck threads. So hogging threads are the ones that use CPU. And that, again, that capability has been in Payara for a long time to detect threads that are hogging CPU, and stuck threads, which is threads that aren't doing anything. So they're hung, essentially. And I've got an aliveness one. This is basically poking the MicroProfile health check endpoint to see whether the server's okay. And we've got a deliberate red one here. So within the metrics as well, we've got standard HTTP things, 200 counts, 400 counts, etc. And sorry, JVM as well. So you've got the general stats that you would see. Both instances are on a single graph, and if you add more instances, they all appear as well. Some of the more interesting bits is when we got, like, say, the traffic lights integrates with the health check service. You can also see the actual data coming out of the health check service as well. And these are basically when we went into amber or into red, and these will typically be heap usage as it goes up above the thresholds that have been set, and then the GC pulls it down. And you can configure how long it is above the graph and things. And that's always all been there in the server, but on the command line. We also have in Payara, and we have had for a long time, is a request tracing service. So what this does is it looks for requests that exceed a certain time. I've set this up to 100 milliseconds, and then it will flag any requests that take longer than that. Like I say, again, that has been in as core functionality for quite a long time. It's just you've had the ability with the monitoring console and Payara Insight to to actually visualize that now. I have a very simple web page, which is a smoke test we use, which does some persistence. So if I kick that off, it takes longer than my threshold, which I think is 30 milliseconds. And you'll see that a request has gone over the threshold. Actually, it didn't that time, which is typical. You can see a request has exceeded the threshold. And then if you go into this, this will be the last trace. And if we go into here, we can see traces and how long they've taken. So if this is the slowest one, it took 7 seconds. And if you click on it, you can see the details of that request. And each trace will have time bars for different phases of the request. In this case, it's just a servlet request. But when you go into it, you can see that it's a servlet request. You can see the details of all the requests, the headers, how long it took, when it happened. And these are some of the same requests that are much smaller now because of the JITs kicking in. But you can see the same sort of data. This one is 38 minutes ago. So that is, again, we've had request tracing for a long time. It can integrate with other tracing systems like Jaeger or Zipkin, but we wanted to show it and give it to people so that they can see it within the server. And request tracing, that's been there for a long time. Traces EJB calls, servlet calls, JAX-RS calls. It traces outbound JAX-RS. And we'll see as I go through some of the details later about it. We've got some new tracing as well. The other thing we have is SQL tracing. And this again, slow SQL tracing has been in the server for a long time. And what Payara Insight is doing is actually just surfacing that data. This is a database access. So if I hit it a few times, then you will see that the slowest SQL that we've had at the minute is 6 milliseconds over the period. That's not long enough. For this, the longest you can put as a threshold for a very slow query that would be alerted is a second. If it exceeded a second, you would get the SQL data, the actual SQL query appear here. So that's a quick rundown of Payara Insight. I just wanted to make it obvious to people that this exists, and the capabilities that have been there in the server for a long time are now much more visible. Once you get them graphically, then people, we believe, will use them more often. And one of the philosophies in Payara is to make the server, instrument all the things that you are doing to make your application way more visible. Because that's the advantage of a managed runtime over just assembling a runtime. So Payara Insight is something we're working on. There'll be future capabilities coming out. We need to unify the alert center for the health check thresholds, and then there's more work that we're doing around building up different notifiers and things as well. So related to that, so in the diagnostics in Payara at the moment, there's something called the notifiers. So notifiers are things that receive alerts from the health check service, from request tracing. And these, previously, the API was like an internal API. And what we've done is completely overhauled this in the last release. And it's now much more easy to make your own notifier. So we've done an overhaul that's released in October. We've rewritten all the existing notifiers as extensions and ported them over to the new API and created a new community repository. And then on top of that, we've implemented new notifiers on the new API. So we implemented a Discord notifier and a Microsoft Teams notifier. We already had XMPP, SNMP, and logging and Datadog and things like that. So this should allow people to take the data that Payara Insights, getting notified of, and actually push it out to external systems. And again, one of the great advantages of our community and enterprise sort of change is that this was a very large change, which I think previously we were too sort of scared to do, if you like, in case we messed it up and we had to wait 3 months in community to fix it. So we're rolling it out into community first, and then when we think this is ready, and then it'll get moved into enterprise. So the repository's there, and that includes all the notifiers, and it also includes an example. So if you want to push this data to somewhere else, or want to contribute a new notifier, then that's the repo to use. So related to the tracing, this was a customer request. So this came into community in August, and now what we've done is we've extended the request tracing to include data from a remote EJB, so a remote EJB client. So now when a remote EJB client calls a server-side EJB, then basically the open tracing span context will go include the client. So, and again, then if that was exceeded a certain threshold, then you'd see the different phases within the Payara Insight request tracing view. Or if you just enable request tracing in the server, you can get it on a log file. And the other thing, because we did this through Open Tracing API, because our request tracing is based on Open Tracing, then this also allows propagation across process boundaries as what's called baggage items. So Open Tracing allows you to effectively attach opaque key value pairs onto the trace. And this can be used to send arbitrary data from client to server. So basically, sort of cross-cutting concerns data. So, for example, it could be a transaction ID or something that some sort of identifier that you want to press send over transparently, and this will allow you to retrieve it using Open Tracing API on the server side. So that gives you a capability to send, like say, out-of-bound data. And we need to do the similar on REST client. We need to instrument the REST client to do this sort of tracing. And we could do the same for SOAP and web services clients. Now we know how to do it. So again, this will expand the sort of tracing capabilities within the runtime. Another big thing, one of our big focuses is developer tooling at the moment. We're trying to build out where we're missing. And IntelliJ was an obvious area where we were missing an IDE tool plugin. So we shipped that, and that's available in the new releases, and it should be available from tools. And so that obviously works with both Payara Community and Payara Enterprise. We've also beefed up the ID plugins, and we're starting to, I think last time I talked about developing a standard capabilities across all plugins and making sure that they're all upgraded and can support the latest versions of Payara. So we've done a lot of work around that. Gaurav on our team is focused on driving these forward, and so we have already got NetBeans one that will get updated regularly to support both enterprise and community latest releases. The Eclipse ID plugin, which hadn't had a lot of love, is getting more love to again be up to speed with all the others. We have a Visual Studio Code extension, and similar for Archillion and Maven. Those containers are all kept up to date, and there's a drive to make sure that they support all platforms. Versions of Payara as they go forward. And again, we also have the cloud connectors, which are released and available on the enterprise side. This is just a repeating, basically, that we also doing this on micro. So we're extending Payara micro support into the Payara micro Maven plugin and keeping that up to date, the Gradle plugin and Maven archetypes. If you've got anything that you think we should be building on the tooling side, we're really keen to make sure that tooling is up to scratch for Payara across the key tool chains that people use. We've also done a lot of work on platform support. So we've now The test team have been doing a lot of work on certifying different JVMs and different operating systems. So we've expanded and kept that up to date. Obviously, if you're a Payara Enterprise customer, you get Zulu as part of our support, Zulu Enterprise. But we also support Oracle JDK. We've just added, full formal support of Corretto and OpenJ9. And we typically will support any OpenJDK derivative. And one of the other things we did is we've certified Payara on Amazon Linux on ARM64 CPUs on Amazon Corretto. Obviously, there's a move in Amazon to use ARM-based servers, which are smaller and cheaper and can be faster. So we support those ARM-based VM instances as well now, and we're testing on those platforms to expand our platform capability. So that's some of the key things that we've done that I just wanted to highlight on this call. Obviously, we built lots of small improvements and new capabilities and bug fixes since the last release, in the last update a couple of months ago, 3 months ago. I just wanted to cover Jakarta EE9 as well, because that also covers one of the new capabilities that we've released. And also cover our approach. So I've stolen a slide from my Jakarta EE update at EclipseCon on Monday, just to reiterate what's in Jakarta EE9. So the key thing with Jakarta EE9 is it moves the namespace from JAVX of all the Java EE APIs to the Jakarta namespace. And along with that, we've removed some of the deprecated specifications like the deployment API, management EJBs, things that are old and people don't use too much. And some of the early web services specs, which were superseded. But that's really just to lower the entry barrier for new Jakarta EE implementations. So there's no new specifications from Java EE8 or Jakarta EE8, except the ones that were pruned from Java SE8. So that includes JAXB, Corba, and some of the other things around XML web services and SOAP, which was actually part of the SC. So they are now all at the Eclipse Foundation, and they've all been moved into the Jakarta EE namespace. Jakarta EE9 is due to be released in end of November, and it will be announced at the Jakarta One live stream, which will be in early December. It seems to be on track for that date, and I'm project lead for GlassFish as well because of our Payara knowledge. Our team does a lot of GlassFish work. And GlassFish 6 will be released around that time frame as well, with support for the new namespace. So the new namespace change is obviously going to be a large breaking change. So one of the reasons to keep Jakarta EE9 the same as Jakarta EE8 is to make that namespace change easier for developers to sort of consume and upgrade to. Because the only thing that will have changed is that namespace. So if you see any other problems with your applications during the change, then it's just the namespace, nothing else. No functionality changes or no behavior changes should be there. So obviously we are Jakarta EE compatible for 8. We're actually expanding. Currently we have that for full profile, and we're about to declare that for web profile on Payara Server, both community and enterprise. We hadn't done web profile before, simply due to time more than anything. So we're just filling in that gap. We're also looking to, in the future, get Payara Micro certified or Jakarta EE compatible for Jakarta EE8 and for the web profile. We've got a little bit of work to do for that, mainly just because the TCK deployment model doesn't match Payara micros. So we'll have to build a connector really from the TCK to micro. It's not that we're going to fail a whole bunch of tests because it uses the same code under the covers as server. So we'll be building that out. And then we look at how we're approaching Jakarta EE 9. So in 5, it is our intention, if possible, to make 5 a Jakarta EE 9 compatible implementation. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to make use of a project called the Eclipse Transformer. So the Eclipse Transformer is a project that it's actually a general project that allows you to set a rule set to transform bytecode from one thing to another and do various manipulations. But a lot of the Java EE Jakarta EE vendors are collaborating to build a set of rules to transform a Jakarta EE 8 application in the JavaX namespace to the EE 9 namespace. So we'll be building out that capability. So again, we'll be building that into community, and then enterprise will follow when we're happy with it. And that might take quite a while before we do that, because I can't see people, wanting to run production Jakarta EE 9 for a while. So in 5, the way we're going to do it, I think I've got a slide next, is, I'll do this first, is that basically we will detect and deployment an application that is in the Jakarta namespace, and we will attempt to move it to the EE 9 Jakarta namespace on the fly during deployment. And then, so that it should work as is without having to do anything. And then as we move to later versions of Payara, we'll probably switch that around. So to support the JavaX namespace, we will probably do the transformation. We'll detect an old application and transform it to be a new application and deploy and run on the Jakarta namespace under the covers. Again, this is sort of an emerging approach, but we think that will work and will enable backwards compatibility. So you'll still be able to run old JavaX applications on the Payara platform in the future for many years to come. So what we started doing is we're starting to drip feed that capability into community. So we provided some support at the moment in the latest releases. And that allows you to take some applications in Jakarta namespace and deploy them onto Payara 5 now. Now it's not Jakarta EE compatible. There's going to be gaps. There's going to be things that we miss. A lot of this will be to do with deployment descriptors. If you're still using deployment descriptors in a new application in the Jakarta namespace, but if that's the bit that currently it won't do at the moment. But if you wanted to write a new application heavily, in new Jakarta EE style and heavy with annotations and things like that, and it's standalone without any deployment descriptors, etc., there's a good chance that it would work on the current version. But it's not. This is a tech preview, and let's say it's the first cut of that implementation. It'll essentially take your Jakarta namespace and transform it back to JavaX and run it on Payara 5. But that will build out more compatibility, and we envisage that we'll then, using that technique, be able to get Jakarta EE 9 compatibility on Payara 5 platform. So that's our approach to Jakarta EE 9. If we look into futures now, so we still have the open roadmap online. I'm still trying to keep this up to date with what developers are doing and trying to give us our intentions. It's effectively done as a GitHub project board. So if you want to ever see what's going on, look on there. Apologies, it's not everything that's going on because it needs to be kept up in sync with the development that's going on, but it tends to capture the big pieces that we're looking at. So what's coming in the next couple of months, the next quarter or so, is we're doing a lot of work on MicroProfile config sources at the moment. We're building out a capability to pull config from different config vaults, if you like. So MicroProfile config is an API that allows you to inject into your application configuration from external config sources. So we already support Kubernetes secrets, and we also already support all the standard MicroProfile ones like environment variables and properties files and things. So we're building out a database config source that I think is not released yet, but is in the code base now. We're also looking at the various cloud vaults. So we are building support for HashiCorp, Azure Key Vault to pull things from Azure, from AWS secrets, and Google Cloud Platform secrets as well. Like I say, we already support Kubernetes secrets. And what we want to do then is, it's still a little bit of work to put a config source into Payara in the internals of Payara, not one that's deployed with your application. That works fine, especially bit of work to actually integrate with the admin console. So just like we did for notifiers, I want the team to externalize that integration, so that create a public API so you can drop ones in that can then be configured from the administration console. And that shall come to sort of build out our MicroProfile support. We're still waiting for MicroProfile 4 to be released. When that happens, probably back end of this year, then we'll be looking to support MicroProfile 4 in a release after that as well. So we're still building MicroProfile support. Another big piece we're doing is an upgrade tool. We're looking to build a sort of minimal viable product first, but the requirements that we're doing is really essentially as a command line tool to upgrade a Payara installation. So that will automate installation of binaries into where your domain was before. It's obviously a server rather than micro. Upgrading the domain.xmls, allow you to apply patch releases if you're an enterprise customer, or previous feature releases, and obviously allow you to back up and restore domains if there's a problem, and to ensure that instances running on different hosts are upgraded. And that any changes that you have will be retained in any custom files. So if you've got library jars integrated with your server, that they're all retained and things. So this is something that's been on the radar for quite a long time. A lot of people have been asking for this, and this is something that is starting to get built now. We're starting to get designed now anyway, and should come in the next 3 to 6 months. Another customer request is around support for GRPC. So we started design work on supporting GRPC services as a first line, as a deployable component. So we're investigating and looking at 2 different options on the minute. One is to integrate a GRPC by exposing a remote EJB. So if you declare something as a remote EJB and put maybe a custom property or custom annotation, and then that will be deployed and exposed as a GRPC service, obviously with the limitations of what can and can't be exposed via GRPC. So we typically be stateless session beans. Or one alternative will be to actually scan for a GRPC service that's in your deployment, and then actually just integrate it with Jakarta APIs. And what we mean by that is, so that it can work with CDI, integrate request scope. It can, use all the standard capabilities of Jakarta EE. So it's just as if it had come in through a servlet call or a JAX-RS call or something like that, so that it would effectively be an application scoped CDI bean or something. And that, again, that's come from a big customer that wants us to look at, is wanting to use gRPC on the client side, but still wants to use all the power of Jakarta on the server side. So it's an interesting project. It's getting designed at the moment alongside with customer, and we should see that coming into community first. There's another big piece of work we're doing at the moment, which is about Payara Cloud. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And where we're going with that, and that actually links quite a bit to our future thinking on where Payara Platform itself goes as well. So the first instance, you can think of Payara Cloud as a platform as a service, and we'll be first launching it as a platform as a service, and it will basically allow you to take a WAR file and deploy it to the cloud. So in the same ways that currently you would take a WAR file and deploy it to Payara Server, then you would take a WAR file, upload it, and deploy it to the cloud. In the first instance, that will be Azure, and it will be a hosted PaaS. And this is something that I've been sort of passionate about for quite a while. As I said earlier around application runtimes, the advantage of Jakarta EE as an API is that it doesn't actually define what the runtime is. If you go through the specifications, it really just defines the packaging format for an application, some of the class loading behavior on the server, and some of the server-side behaviors, but it doesn't actually say that you must run this as an application server. And so what we're doing with Payara Cloud is actually taking that model, that deployment model, and applying it to all the infrastructure. So what does that actually mean under the covers? So from a user interface perspective, it's just going to be you deploy and then you access your URL and you have your application running on Azure. Under the covers, what we've built is effectively a Kubernetes native infrastructure. So without having to, you as a developer, to worry about containers, setting up YAML files, setting up Kubernetes, or any of that sort of side of things, what we've done is that we are building a Jakarta EE runtime that sits on top of all that and manages all that infrastructure on your behalf, so that you can get the benefits and scalability of Kubernetes with the failover, elasticity, liveness checks, and all, pod killing, and all the things that you can set up in Kubernetes, but that you don't have to worry about. This will be handled by the Payara Cloud infrastructure. So as a developer, what you'll do is you'll just package up a Jakarta EE compliant application. In the first instance, because this runs on Payara Micro on Kubernetes under the covers, then you will be packaging up a web profile application along with the additional APIs that Payara Micro supports, which is JBatch, concurrency, and some JMS clients. And then you will deploy it. And what we do under the covers is that we set up the pods, we set up the containers, we build the containers, we provision the SSL certificates, and then we deploy the application and give you a URL endpoint. So it's what we're saying is what cloud native should be. So you don't have to worry about, say container setup, YAML files, and all the other things that you need to do with that horrible mess that is Kubernetes. And so this is first going to be launched as a cloud PaaS. Longer term, I wanted to talk about how that impacts Payara 6, and this is so our long-term goals will be to launch Payara Cloud on Azure as a PaaS, probably for customers that are happy with all of that infrastructure being managed. We'll probably then look at allowing people to deploy it internally themselves onto their own, for example, their own AKS instances or GKS instances, or Amazon Kubernetes as well, or internally on their own data center Kubernetes. But how this is going to impact Payara 6 or beyond is that we're looking at building and developing the knowledge that we've got from the cloud runtime to also start enabling Payara 6 to see that effectively these things are compute infrastructure. And so we currently in Payara, we have the concept of nodes. We're looking, again, this is very experimental, looking at how you encompass that concept to both include sort of instances of containers, hosts, physical hosts, VMs, and putting a sort of abstraction over the top of that, with the DAS also being abstracting the orchestrator that you may have, like Kubernetes or the VM auto scaling you can get in clouds, or node scaling. And so this product will also start influencing how future Payara server domain model works, and how you could be able to just target and deploy instances onto the various different compute options that you may have. So again, this is very much building on the fact that as a Jakarta EE runtime vendor, it really should be our problem to manage the compute infrastructure for you as a developer, and give you visibility of what's going on, and build out and support these new deployment models that are coming along, and allowing you to concentrate on building your application. So there is a video online, a teaser. There'll be a demo coming out soon as well. The teaser video has links to sign up to follow what we're doing with cloud. So if you're interested in that, then please sign up for that. So that's all I've got today. Back to Jaden to see if there's any questions, feedback, anything that people want to say. We're always open for driving the product in the directions that you want to go.
Fantastic, thank you very much. So at the minute, no questions in the Q&A section, and we do have a question in the chat. Devin Miller asks, is this a cloud hosted by Payara PaaS, or an application we deploy to our cloud?
Currently, the first version of Payara Cloud will be one that we host. So you will just log on and have an account and upload your WAR files, and we'll be able to run them. Longer term, our view is to create this as an installable piece of software that can then be installed into any Kubernetes cluster, whether it's on Azure, Amazon, or on-premise. So we look to support, things like OpenShift or Rancher, or other things that manage Kubernetes.
Okay, brilliant. Right. If anyone else has any other questions, can obviously email us, or get in touch via our social media, anything like that, and we'll do our best to get back to you. But otherwise, thank you very much, everyone. Cheers.
Thanks.